Every single night while you lie in bed scrolling, your phone is conducting a silent biological attack on the one system standing between you and serious illness. Not slowly, not gradually, right now, tonight. And the most disturbing part? The damage shows up weeks, months, even years later, disguised as something else entirely. A cold that won't quit, a vaccine that didn't seem to work, fatigue that no amount of sleep fixes. You blame stress, you blame your diet, you blame the season, but the evidence points somewhere else. It points to the device charging on your nightstand. Before we go further, if you have concerns about your sleep, your immune health, or any symptoms discussed today, please speak with your doctor. This video is for educational purposes only, but stay until the end because the specific evidence-based steps you can take to protect yourself are coming, and they will surprise you with how simple they are. Here's what nobody is telling you clearly enough. Sleep is not rest. It is not passive. It is not your body doing nothing. During sleep, the human body carries out processes that are biologically impossible at any other time of day. The immune system repairs cellular damage. It hunts down pathogens that slipped past your defenses during waking hours. It produces infection-fighting compounds that require the hormonal conditions of deep sleep to be synthesized. And perhaps most remarkably, it files the biological memory of every threat it has encountered, cataloging pathogens, recording responses, storing that information into long-lived immune cells for rapid deployment the next time the same threat appears. This is not a metaphor. This is active, time-dependent, irreplaceable biological work. And your phone is interrupting it every night. Consider a 34-year-old woman, healthy by every conventional measure, reasonable diet, occasional exercise, roughly 6.5 hours of sleep. Each evening, 20 to 30 minutes before bed, she picks up her phone, scrolling, reading, responding to messages. She calls it a wind-down routine. She has no idea what is physiologically happening the moment that screen illuminates her face. At the back of her retina sit specialized cells called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. These cells have nothing to do with conventional vision. They exist for one purpose only, to detect light and transmit a signal to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the brain's master clock. When they detect screen light in a darkened room, they deliver a single, unambiguous message to the brain. Daytime. The brain responds immediately. It suppresses melatonin release from the pineal gland. And here is where most explanations stop. Here is where this one begins. Melatonin is not simply a sleep hormone. That description is so incomplete it is almost misleading. Melatonin is an anti-inflammatory agent, a potent antioxidant, a master timing signal that coordinates the entire nocturnal work cycle of the immune system. It carries receptors directly on natural killer cells, T cells, B cells, and macrophages. When melatonin rises naturally in the evening, it does not simply induce drowsiness. It functions as the starting gun for the immune system's night shift. It signals cytokine production to begin. It coordinates when immune cells move, what they target, and when they stand down. It activates anti-inflammatory molecular pathways that prevent chronic immune dysregulation. When your phone suppresses melatonin, it doesn't just delay your sleep. It cancels the immune system's entire scheduled work cycle. It silences the biological coordinator of your body's most critical nightly maintenance. But here's where the complexity accelerates, because the light is only the beginning of what that phone is doing to you. While she's scrolling, her brain is processing. Every notification triggers a micro-threat detection response. Every charged post, every message requiring a mental calculation, every piece of news that demands evaluation, keeps a neural system running that is supposed to be powering down. Her body has a stress hormone called cortisol. Cortisol follows a strict circadian rhythm. It should decline steadily through the evening, reaching its lowest concentration during the early hours of sleep, creating the hormonal conditions under which immune surveillance can operate most efficiently. But as long as her brain is engaged, stimulated, reacting, cortisol stays elevated. The sympathetic nervous system remains partially active. And here is the critical insight that changes everything. Her body's stress response system cannot distinguish between a genuine threat and a social media feed. It responds to perceived demand. Her phone is a perceived demand. Every scroll is a survival alert. Every notification is a small biological emergency. The cortisol never falls. The immune system never fully activates. And tomorrow morning, she wakes up wondering why she feels unrested. Research measuring slow-wave sleep activity found that smartphone use before bed is directly associated with reduced deep sleep in the first quarter of the night and disruption to the cortisol awakening response the following morning. This matters enormously. Deep sleep, clinically called slow-wave sleep or stage 3 non-REM sleep, is not simply the deepest stage of rest. It is the immune system's primary operating window. During slow-wave sleep, pro-inflammatory signaling proteins called cytokines, including interleukin-1, interleukin-6, and tumor necrosis factor alpha, are produced at elevated levels. These proteins are the immune system's coordination network. They tell immune cells where to go, what to engage, when to retreat. The body deliberately concentrates their production in deep sleep, not by accident, by design. And simultaneously, immunological memory undergoes active consolidation during this stage. Antigen-presenting cells that spent the day cataloging threats begin transferring that intelligence to long-lived T cells for permanent storage. The research describes this as a direct parallel to how the brain files declarative memory during sleep. Your immune system is literally learning while you sleep. Interrupting that process doesn't just reduce rest, it erases the filing. What doesn't get consolidated doesn't get remembered. And next time that pathogen appears, the response will be slower, less precise, and less effective. The downstream consequences are not theoretical. They are measured, reproducible, and alarming in their magnitude. Natural killer cells form the body's frontline biological surveillance system. Their function is to identify and destroy infected and abnormal cells before they can replicate and spread, including cells in the earliest stages of malignant transformation. Research led by Dr. Michael Irwin at UCLA found that a single night of sleep restricted to 4 hours reduced natural killer cell activity to approximately 70% of that of fully rested individuals. One night, not months of poor sleep. One night produced a near-complete collapse of this surveillance system. Epidemiological follow-up data associated reduced natural killer cell function with a 1.6 times higher risk of cancer mortality over an 11-year observation period. That is a correlation, not causal proof. But 1.6 times is not a number that gets dismissed. Then consider T cells, the adaptive immune system's precision response units. When sleep is restricted, T cells become less adhesive. They lose binding capacity. They cannot efficiently attach to and clear the pathogens they were designed to eliminate. Both T cells and B cells show reduced proliferative capacity under sleep restriction, meaning the immune system loses its ability to mount the sustained, organized response required to clear infections and build durable protection against recurrence. Pro-inflammatory cytokines remain elevated rather than completing their natural nocturnal reset. What was designed as a temporary immune signal becomes a persistent background state, chronic low-grade inflammation, a system that never returns to baseline. And in the research literature, that chronic state is consistently associated with elevated risk of cardiometabolic conditions, autoimmune diseases, and neurodegenerative conditions. Not immediately, silently, cumulatively, over years of phone use before bed. The infection susceptibility data make this concrete in a way that cannot be argued with. At the University of California, San Francisco, in collaboration with Carnegie Mellon University, 164 healthy adults had their sleep objectively measured by wrist actigraphy for 1 full week, not self-reported, monitored. Then they were administered nasal drops containing rhinovirus, the common cold, quarantined, and observed for 5 days. Adults who averaged 6 hours of sleep or fewer were 4 times more likely to become infected than those who averaged more than 7 hours. 39% of the short sleeping group got sick. 18% of the longer sleeping group did. The lead researcher, Dr. Arik Prather, reported that sleep duration was a stronger predictor of infection than age, stress levels, smoking status, race, income, or education, after adjusting for all variables. Sleep outperformed every other factor, 4 times more likely to get sick from 1 week of habitual short sleep, not a year of poor sleep, 1 week. And the vaccine data are just as unambiguous. Restricting sleep to 4 hours per night for 6 consecutive nights before influenza vaccination reduced antibody production by more than 50% compared with rested controls. The vaccine was administered, the immune system was present, but without adequate deep sleep for consolidation, it could not complete the biological work required to build durable protection. Now consider the scale at which this is happening. Approximately 87% of adults in the United States sleep with their phone in the bedroom. Around 90% of teenagers keep their phones on or beside their beds. Among regular nighttime phone users in a 2024 study, 66% had clinically poor sleep quality scores. 80% had prolonged sleep latency. 90% showed sleep disturbances. A 2025 study published in JAMA Network Open found that screen users who use screens before bed had a 33% higher rate of poor sleep quality and slept approximately 50 minutes less per week than those who avoided screens. A separate study of nearly 40,000 university students found that each additional hour of screen use after going to bed was associated with a 59% higher likelihood of clinically significant insomnia. These are not marginal signals. They are consistent, large-scale, reproducible findings across multiple populations and methodologies. A common response to this information is to enable night mode or a blue light filter. The evidence does not support this as a solution. Studies specifically testing night mode settings found little to no meaningful improvement in sleep onset latency or sleep quality compared to standard screen use. A 2025 systematic review and meta-analysis published in Frontiers in Neurology, examining blue light blocking glasses across multiple randomized controlled trials from 2010 to 2024, concluded that evidence remains inconsistent and no clinical consensus on objective sleep outcomes currently exists. One research group concluded directly, the dominant disruptive factor is not the wavelength of the light. It is the cognitive and psychological engagement the phone produces. Night mode addresses the light. It does not address the cortisol. It does not reduce stimulation. It does not power down the nervous system. The only group that consistently shows better sleep outcomes in these studies is the group that does not use the phone before bed at all. Here is what the evidence actually supports. The American Academy of Sleep Medicine recommends ceasing screen use entirely at least 60 to 90 minutes before bed, not because of light alone, but because of the combined cascade of light suppression, cortisol elevation, and cognitive stimulation, all of which require time to metabolize before the body can begin the transition into restorative sleep. Research has found that smartphone use outside the bedroom does not have the same negative impact on sleep architecture as use in bed. Location matters. If phone use must occur in the evening, it is meaningfully less disruptive when it ends at least an hour before sleep and does not occur in the bedroom. Removing the phone from the bedroom entirely eliminates ambient standby light, removes the temptation to check at 3 a.m., and breaks the psychological conditioning that associates the bed with an alert, active mental state. For those using the phone as an alarm clock, a basic standalone device resolves that function without a connected screen in the sleep environment. Morning light exposure, natural sunlight within the first hour of waking, supports circadian clock resetting, which improves melatonin production the following evening and synchronizes immune cell timing throughout the day. This is not a supplement. It is a physiological mechanism that works when the light-dark cycle is respected. On reversibility, the research offers measured reassurance with important caveats. Natural killer cell activity returns toward baseline following a recovery night of adequate sleep. The acute suppression is not permanent, but certain immune markers take longer to normalize. Some cytokine levels and T-cell functional measures do not immediately return to baseline after a single good night, and the long-term consequences of chronically disrupted sleep, sustained systemic inflammation, and elevated risk of cardiometabolic and neurodegenerative conditions are not resolved by short-term recovery alone. Weekend sleep does not fully compensate for a week of habitual disruption. Biology is not that forgiving. Here is the summary the evidence demands. Habitual pre-sleep phone use suppresses melatonin through both light and psychological pathways. Suppressed melatonin dismantles the coordination of the immune system's nightly work cycle. Disrupted slow-wave sleep impairs cytokine production, collapses natural killer cell activity, reduces T-cell adhesion and function, and interrupts the consolidation of immunological memory. Chronically elevated cortisol from psychological engagement with the phone compounds all of these effects overnight. The consequences are not speculative. A 70% reduction in natural killer cell activity after one short night, a fourfold increase in infection risk after 1 week of habitual short sleep, a greater than 50% reduction in vaccine antibody production after less than a week of restricted sleep. These are reproducible findings from controlled human research conducted by independent groups at multiple institutions. The immune damage does not announce itself. It arrives quietly, as slow recoveries, frequent illness, ineffective vaccines, persistent fatigue, unnamed inflammation. The mechanisms are understood. The research is consistent. The primary modifiable factor is the phone on the nightstand. Put it in another room. Give the body the darkness and stillness it requires, and let the immune system complete the work it has been designed, across millions of years of biological evolution, to do.